are two issues for discussion today. We'll start with the Prescott Caborca Sister City Committee's 50th anniversary presentation and update.
Good afternoon, Mayor, council members, staff, welcome Joe officially, and citizens, and Stewart, Economic Initiatives Manager. It is my pleasure to introduce this next item, and representatives from the Prescott Caborca Committee are here today to deliver their presentation. But a little bit of background. The Tourism Office has had some touches with the sister city committees over the last several years. That was mainly due to expenses that were being paid out of bed tax and some different administrative assistance. The expenses basically all started being paid out of bed tax since 2008, after 2008, around that time. However, this is not usually an initiative or program that falls under the Tourism Office. It's most commonly under the city manager's office, or if the mayor and council have a program, that type of thing. And recently we did transfer it back to the city manager's office, to Amber Frazier, Special Projects. Thank you, Amber. And so it's just been our pleasure to be able to assist the sister city committees. And it's our hope today that basically after their wonderful presentation, there's a better understanding of the city's role for the sister cities committees, and that perhaps there's possible reconsideration for sister city budget reestablishment for fiscal year 2024. And just as a reminder, the city of Prescott, we do have 3 sister cities. We have Suchitoto, El Salvador, which is inactive. That sister city program is currently inactive. Caborca, Mexico, who you'll hear from today. And then Zeitz, Germany, which we all know Councilman Moore just visited. And this sister city committee, they may choose also to come forward at some time to engage and tell you about their wonderful programming, because they do a lot as well. Before we begin the presentation, just to note, there are a couple slides that are going to look different than what we gave to you, but overall it's the same. There's just 2 that are different, maybe 3. But that's about it. And of course, after they're finished, we're happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Excellent.
Good afternoon.
Bienvenidos, mi amigos. Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Noel D'Souza, and along with Will Fisher, we're going to make a presentation. Will and I are both on the board of directors of the Prescott Caborca Sister City Committee. We also have a number of our members who decided to come by to give us some support. If you just, wave. Thank you very much for showing up. That's half of what it means to be successful, is to basically show up. We're going to share several aspects of our organization with you today, and I want to let you know ahead of time that many of these features have a story of their own. We also know we have limited time today. If you want additional details about some of the things we're going to talk about, either here today or on another occasion that we might get together, and I'll talk about some of them during my presentation.
All I want to say is that Noel is the play-by-play guy, and I'm the color man, so I'll jump in every once in a while to say a few things, to try to spice it up a little bit.
Thanks, Will.
Yeah, I have the boring script to read. Yes, thank you. We do have several objectives for today, and as was previously mentioned, one of the main objectives, and maybe the most important one, is to reestablish closer relationships with mayor and city leaders. From my perspective, and this is just a personal perspective, I would like the members of the council and the mayor and other city leaders to feel like they are part of our organization. And I know that we do send out information about the times that we get together, and I want you to feel very comfortable coming to any of the events that we do, and again, to feel part of our organization. This is our mission. We are a 501c3 nonprofit charity corporation which is run exclusively by volunteers. And I know that all of us here have been parts of such organizations. Our mission, which is on the screen right now, was established about 50 years ago by our founding members when the Prescott Sister City was formed. What these founding members sought then is still relevant today. However, it's been 50 years, and it's always good for an organization to do some introspection from time to time, and I hope that that's in our near future. However, the last two lines will always describe our emphasis, our process for getting things accomplished.
And those two lines had to do with our reciprocal visits and cultural and educational exchange programs. For 50 years now, we have had an active opportunity to visit with the folks from Caborca. We've also done cooperatively with those folks educational exchange programs, mostly that have to do with language.
As noted on this slide, Caborca, we are fortunate to be within 1 day's drive of Prescott, which allows us to get together, as Will just mentioned, with the Caborca Sister City organization several times each year. Please note that in the one slide, the municipality of Caborca is significantly larger than the city proper, about twice the size of the state of Delaware here in the United States. Our accomplishments over the past 50 years have been many. Here are a few highlights, things that we've done, are doing, and are particularly proud of. I hope I have an opportunity at some time, or someone in our organization has an opportunity to talk about the return of the baptismal font, which was a 15-year endeavor.
One of the things that didn't make it on one of those tabs up there is that in 2013, the Sister Cities International, which is our large sponsoring group, voted Prescott the best overall program for cities with populations between 25,000 and 50,000. And that's a fantastic accomplishment to be selected out of the entire country as the best program.
The previous slide highlighted several of our major past and continuing accomplishments. This slide depicts some of the programs and projects that we're implementing on an ongoing basis, a reflection of the two lines in our mission statement that I alluded to a few moments ago. And again, as I said in my introductory comments, I would be more than glad to have a conversation with some of you, or one of you, with respect to some of these, as would others of our members. Now let's turn a little bit to some of the characteristics of Caborca. Again, a number of these have background stories. If your interest is piqued, we'd be glad to enlighten you, perhaps when you attend one of the several events that we have planned this coming weekend, to which City Council members are invited. And also, a possibility will be when one or some of you attend our 50th anniversary gala on September 17th.
When Mayor Hicks signed the resolution 727 in 1972 to invite Caborca to be a part of our sister city relationship, the cities were selected because of the similarities that we each had. At that time, agriculture and ranching was a big thing. Also, right outside of their town is one of their largest silver mines in Sonora, and of course we have the Baghdad mine right outside here. So there were many similarities between their town and our town, which is what expedited the selection of Caborca.
This slide, along with the next several slides, are going to provide some pictorial examples of our experiences. What we see here is an ambulance that we have collaborated with Lifeline. We have actually collaborated with Lifeline to deliver 4 ambulances that they retired but were still useful vehicles. It's also through Lifeline that we've been able to purchase a couple of AEDs to donate to be used in these ambulances. Acronite is one of the regular visits that the Caborcans enjoy participating in. You might recognize the gentleman there that's in the front. Both here during Acronite and on other occasions in Caborca, Will has organized joint choirs involving the members of both of our organizations, and both members are depicted here in this picture.
As cultural exchange has been one of our major focus points, we've discovered, of course, that music is one of the primary things that connect different groups from here and there. We might not completely understand each other speaking, but we always understand each other through music. In the past 50 years, I do know that the Yavapai College and the sister cities here have collaborated in Yavapai sending down to Caborca in 4 different occasions music groups to perform in Caborca, both bands and choirs from Yavapai College, all under the wing of the sister cities. It's a great way to get together.
Dia de los Muertos. We sometimes think of the Day of the Dead as a Halloween event because it occurs around the same time in October or early November. But for the Mexican and other Latina cultures, it's a celebration of their ancestors, and it has a much more serious intent. 6 de Abril commemorates the reason why Caborca is designated as a heroica city. It's an interesting story, even though it did not turn out too well for the Americans involved, as the picture on the lower right-hand side illustrates, of the gentleman from our organization who was marching in the 6 de Abril parade in Caborca a couple of years ago.
We could go back, Amber, to this. 6 de Abril is a Caborcan festival. It seems that Henry Crabb, back in 1857, an American civilian, gathered together a group of guys, and they marched down to Caborca to sort of have an insurrection and take over the city and claim that part of Mexico for themselves. The people of Caborca gathered together, and you can see in the slide the cathedral in the background, which is, by the way, is a Father Kino cathedral. They gathered inside that building and held off the Americans in a several-day battle, and eventually overran the Americans, and now the Caborcans celebrate the fact that they're still Caborcans.
This slide illustrates that in much the same manner as many other organizations, during COVID, we continued to hold our monthly meetings during Zoom, using Zoom. And during several of those meetings, we were joined by our Caborcan friends. Also during COVID, we reached out to our Caborca friends and helped them reach out to needy people in their community.
Yeah, the gentleman on the left is Mario Leon Felix. He's the, Noel, by the way, is the president of our committee. And Mario there is the president of their committee. And we've worked together with him to do a lot of projects, and of course he lets us know if there are certain projects that he finds that we should attend to. By the way, Mario will be up here on this weekend.
And this is a slide that simply lists many of the different things that we've accomplished over the past 50 years. The most enjoyable time for our respective Caborcan and Prescott Sister City groups are the occasions when we can get together in person. This typically happens about 4 times a year, though COVID has restrained us significantly over the past 2 years. We do look forward to resuming these regular visitations. There are other special occasions when we arrange to get together, such as this coming weekend, when a number of our friends from Caborca will join our float entry in the rodeo parade. Another upcoming special event, which I mentioned earlier, and which will include the Caborcans and hopefully some of you, is our 50th anniversary gala celebration on September 17th. This chart depicts the several programs and events that we have held and are planning during our 50th anniversary year. A few of those we would ask you to note are the current display in the Prescott Public Library viewery on the main floor, which I hope some of you take the opportunity to look at Saturday morning at 8:15 when we will be meeting there with the Caborcans, and also some upcoming events on the rodeo weekend, which I'll detail on the next slide. And again, I mentioned our 50th anniversary gala. This coming weekend, there's going to be several events to which we invite council members. You can meet some of our members and the members of the Caborca Sister City. We also have some very special guests visiting Prescott this coming weekend. We had originally scheduled the mayor of Caborca, El Presidente Abraham Miernagalas, but just this morning we found out that he was summoned to Hermosillo by the governor of Sonora to talk about finance issues respective of Caborca, so he's not going to be able to make it. But we will have the Mexican consul, the Honorable Jorge Mendoza Yescas, and the Deputy Consul, the Honorable Geraldo Valenzuela Buelna. And we hope that you will take an opportunity to meet and greet them during some of the things that we have up there. I think we've shared a more detailed schedule with some of your folks here at the city. The relationship between Prescott Caborca Sister City Committee and the City of Prescott has varied over the past 50 years. This slide illustrates a couple of ways that the city currently supports us, the signs that have been posted along the highways at our entrances, and also that the city's website is our website. The City of Prescott is also on our mailing list for our quarterly newsletters and periodic updates. We acknowledge and are very grateful for the financial support that helps us address some of the typical administrative expenses that active nonprofit organizations must address, as was mentioned during our introduction. But since the Great Recession, prior to the Great Recession, that is, the city's contributions were a little more generous, and we're hoping to move back to that level. Since this is our 50th year anniversary, we are asking that the city be represented at our 50th anniversary events, specifically to help support our 50th anniversary gala event on September 17th. As our organization moves forward, we want you to know that we will not be letting up on the intensity of our programs and projects. This year, our 50th year, has motivated us to plan and do more, as was noted in the schedule of events that I previously shared. We are contemplating making our participation in public community-wide events, such as Cinco de Mayo at the Hacienda Inn, being represented in the rodeo or other community parades, our collaboration with Yavapai College for Hispanic Heritage Month, and the Gala or such similar event annually. In addition to those that we already participate in, such as events on the square that are sponsored by the Prescott Chamber of Commerce. I want to thank you for listening. Do you have any questions?
Pro Tem.
Yes, this sounds like a fabulous program, and I support it 100%, and I would like to see it continue. But I do have some kind of nuts and bolts to go over. Recently we had an incident with another foundation involving city monies, and I would just like to ask if you carry a business insurance policy with coverage for fraudulent acts.
Yes.
And also, would you be able to submit a profit and loss statement about your finances signed by a CPA?
I don't know that we could afford to have a CPA. I mean, our budget yearly is somewhere in around $15,000, and I know that the expense of a CPA, we could submit a budget, a finance, profit and loss type of thing. We go over those kinds of things every time the board meets. Will, who is the co-treasurer with Peggy Hallman, basically has been keeping a very good track of our monies. But in answer to your question, I think a CPA is a little bit out of our range. So,
Okay, thank you.
you're welcome.
Councilman Montoya.
Thank you, Mayor. What time is your gala?
What time?
Yeah, you said September 17th at the Adult Center.
Yes, it's going to be in the evening.
Okay. Yeah, I guess more directly, if you want us to attend, it would be helpful if you could send an invitation directly to us. That would be, for my purposes of planning, then I'd be more able to attend.
Directly to you, Brandon?
Well, no, I think they plan on doing that. Today, they're just sharing the save the date with you. And of course, the formal invitation would go to Martha, and she would get that to you guys, absolutely.
Perfect. Thank you.
Other
Any other
questions?
questions or comments?
I'll make a comment.
Councilman Moore.
Having just recently visited our sister city, Zeitz, Germany, last month, it was a lovely experience. Really, really enjoyed it, and I would love to be involved in some of your activities, and hopefully would have the opportunity someday to go down and visit them as well. So thank you for what you're doing. I think it's wonderful.
Thanks, Eric. We're doing our gala celebration in September, of course, but in Caborca, they're celebrating the 50th anniversary also, and in October, they're planning to do their big gala activity, which happens to line up with our October visitation with them. So when we find out exactly what the date is, we'll make sure everybody knows, and if you'd love to go along with us, we'd love to have you.
Thanks.
Well, thank you, Will, and thank you, Noel. I know I've been involved in a number of the activities of the Sister City organization over the last few years, and had a chance to meet the Council General at the meeting that was over at Yavapai College. So it certainly would be valuable to continue this association that we're going to be celebrating, or you're going to be celebrating. Hopefully it's we, in September for 50 years. And looking at the original commitment that was signed by Mayor Taylor Hicks. Goes back a long way. So thanks again, and good luck to all of you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Buena suerte.
Buena suerte.
All right, then we'll move on to the next item on our agenda. Presentation and discussion regarding City Council attendance policy and updates on the Council's rules of procedure.
Thank you, Mayor. Council, before you is an item that was requested by Councilman Montoya and Mayor Pro Tem Rusing. Earlier this year, there was an inquiry regarding the city's attendance policy for council members. An analysis of the city charter was provided by the city's legal department, and consequently, staff was asked to look into this a bit further regarding attendance and absenteeism at council meetings. The city clerk's office conducted a little bit of research. I contacted all of the jurisdictions that are part of the Arizona Municipal Clerks Association, and I received 15 responses from my fellow clerks related to their council rules, procedures, and attendance policies that they have in place for their council members. A number of the jurisdictions do have references similar to what is contained within the City of Prescott's charter related to attendance, though none of them specifically referenced consent or excused. So I worked with the legal department, and we put together some revisions, proposed revisions to the council rules of procedure, which you all had within your agenda packet. And the suggestion was to include some more specific definitions as it relates to the attendance policy and the city charter language specifically. We would like to hold any further updates to be part of the overall charter review and amendments at a future election, which, as you all know, would need to go before the voters. But I do feel that it would be important for us to include that within the charter review discussions, specific amendments to that section. But staff thought it would be beneficial to have an overall conversation about the policy and inclusion of that policy with some more specific outlines so that the expectations are clear. And if we add that into the council rules of procedure with a reference to the charter, we think that would be an appropriate way to do that, but we're open to any suggestions that you all might have.
Well, thank you, Sarah. I know it came to my attention when there were some inquiries about the city charter and the rules of procedure regarding attendance and absenteeism from meetings. And as we looked at that, it was difficult from what we currently have to really define what is a meeting, what is a called meeting. Is a study session the same as a called meeting? 3 consecutive, potentially, if you assumed certain definitions, could happen in the course of one day. So even though the intention is to review the city charter and try to clarify some of these discrepancies and make it much more understandable and specific, between now and the time the city charter is suggested for changes and voted on and amended, the council's rules of procedure do prevail. So I think there's an appropriate time here to clarify this now so that there isn't any question about absences or what is a meeting and what is a called meeting, et cetera. So if you want to continue with the analysis and the recommended changes, we can. Did you have a question, Councilman Shishka?
No, sir.
No? So please proceed.
So I can read through what we specifically added into the draft revised council rules of procedure, and I'll just go ahead and read it. So we added in Rule 7, related to attendance. In accordance with the City Charter, Article 2, Section 11, if the mayor or any member of council shall be absent from at least 3 consecutive called meetings without prior notice to the council, city clerk, or city manager, he or she shall by a majority vote of the balance of council cease to hold office. So then in including that, we added some definitions for purposes of this section. Consecutive meetings would mean successively following without interruption. Prior notice for purposes of this section would mean written notification at least 24 hours in advance of the called meeting. And as noted previously, that would be either to council, city clerk, or the city manager. And a called meeting for purposes of this section shall mean any official voting meeting, study session, executive session, official meeting of a council subcommittee, budget workshop of the city council, duly called pursuant to local and Arizona law. And I know that Mr. Young had some concerns with regards to the consecutive meeting, given that oftentimes we do have 3 meetings in one day. Today, for example, we're having an executive session this morning, conducting this meeting right now, and then we have a voting meeting at 3 p.m. So it was also suggested that perhaps the consecutive meetings would be following without interruption on subsequent days, so that if someone were to, for example, have some sort of family emergency or an illness, something along those lines where they wouldn't have the 24-hour notification, there would be a little bit of leeway there, but we're, as I said, open to any suggestions that the council might have.
I think for the most part, that kind of consideration is reasonable. Sometimes family emergencies and other situations can occur without really any notice or the ability to notify the city clerk or the council that such an emergency has arisen. And I don't think that would justify removing somebody from office because of that vagueness within the current rules of procedure. Councilman Montoya.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to make sure I want to clarify something, Sarah, just to make sure I understood. So I think the language I heard you say was subcommittees of council as well. So I would take that to mean, like, for instance, the Water Issues Subcommittee.
Correct.
So if someone were to miss, say, the Water Issues Subcommittee meeting that's next week, would have missed, like, that was on that subcommittee, presumably. And then they were to miss meeting today, and then following council, that would then trigger that 3 consecutive. Am I stating that correctly? I just want to make sure I have it right.
Joe, it was my understanding that we added in the language about the council subcommittees specifically for the subcommittee purposes. So if you were a member of, for example, the Water Issues Subcommittee and you missed 3 of those meetings without the prior notice, that would then trigger the attendance issue, but it would not be tied to the council meetings. Did I understand that interpretation correctly?
Correct. It would be since it's consecutive days, it wouldn't be tied to those same meetings.
Okay, so the subcommittee would operate independently of the council meetings, is what I hear the both of you saying.
Yes, it's holding the subcommittee members
To the same policy.
to the same policy as the balance of council here at council meetings
That makes
of
sense.
the whole.
That makes sense, and I appreciate the clarification. The other thing I would just say is that I think that I read through the language in the packet. I think this is a good step forward. I'm very happy to hear the mayor say that there's going to be a review of the charter done. I think there's this issue specifically in the charter, but I think there are other issues that deserve clarification.
There's quite a list.
Yeah, I've got a long list myself, and I know other
Based upon your
departments do too.
comments, I think we should probably include in this recommended language subcommittee meetings, in addition to the reference to these primary called meetings. So that would be clarified.
We can definitely firm up that language before we would bring back the item for you all to vote on at a voting meeting.
Mayor Pro Tem.
I would just like to suggest that concerning at least 24 hours notice in advance, insert something in case of a emergency something along that lines, and the word emergency, let the council decide if it was a true emergency or something, but just something in case there was an emergency and the person couldn't contact anyone. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think we can make those changes or alternative language for you to decide on and address that, and then you can choose if you want that or not. And I think what it comes down to, in large part, is that in 1979, you wouldn't have 3 meetings in one day. It would be one meeting with an executive session and with the study session as part of one. So it's clarifying for a modern audience what that was intended.
Yeah, considering the ongoing and many challenges that we've had with leases and contracts and personnel issues, et cetera, it's becoming more of a regular occurrence to have an executive session virtually every meeting of the council, every second and fourth Tuesday. So even though when it was originally put together, that would have been much more rare, now it's really a common occurrence. Councilman Moore?
Thank you, Mayor. I was just wanted to ask the question, is it your intention that we would have the recommendations for the changes to the charter ready for the election, next year's election? That would go to the voters next year when we have the next election for our city council?
My suggestion would be to have that on a ballot in the 2025 election. A charter review, generally speaking, is a very comprehensive project, much in line with the general plan review. We typically would have either an mayoral ad hoc commission, or a newly established review committee work with staff. There would be a number of presentations to council to come. There would be a number of meetings with the public to engage them and get their feedback in what they feel needs to be amended. We could certainly take a look at timelines, but I would say in order to have an appropriately reviewed, comprehensive examination of the charter and make suggestions for amendments that are in line with what the public, staff, and council would want, I think that a 2023 update would be cutting us very short.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about it, it's our city constitution in essence. So I think a thorough and deliberate consideration of what changes would be recommended to the council so that there would be not only council but also public debate on it would be appropriate to have a kind of a measured and thorough look at the city charter and then present it to the voters for their approval. Councilman Montoya.
Just one more question, and I apologize, I don't have it in front of me, the packet language. Is there a definition for what determines attendance? And I guess what I'm thinking here is, like, for instance, we've had members in the past attend via Zoom. I know some organizations that I'm part of that are nonprofit boards, they'll allow you to attend via telephone or Zoom, but you're more of a listening participant as opposed to a voting participant. But my experience has been that that's not the way we have engaged with Zoom.
We don't have a specific definition as far as attendance or whether or not, attending via electronic means. Obviously, as Mr. Young pointed out, this was a addition to the charter in 1979, so I don't know that Zoom existed then. But even for our purposes, I know prior to COVID, we didn't have the hybrid meeting option that we have now. And so if a person was not physically present for the meeting, they simply didn't participate. There were a few exceptions when it came to telephone participation in significant matters on e-sessions, but nothing specific to telephonic participation in a meeting like this or a voting meeting. Obviously, since we introduced the hybrid meeting option during COVID, there's been a lot more opportunity for members of council to participate if they're out of town or ill, and that has become much more the norm. I actually got into a conversation with a number of the clerks that responded to me about that because they also don't have anything relative to that within their council rules of procedures or their charters. It is certainly something, excuse me, that we could add in to the language if you all feel it's appropriate and would like to have that in there. I do think if we're going to continue to have the hybrid option and the public can participate in that manner, I do think it's beneficial to be able to have council participate even if they're not physically here. But if that's not something that the majority of council wanted to continue to have, then we could certainly address it specifically within the language.
Is there a possibility, I mean, and I think what I hear you saying is that the hybrid option might disappear. You know, it could be the will of the council to make the hybrid option for the general public disappear. And I know that Councilman Tenney, who works for the school district, has talked about that they don't do that option anymore because they weren't finding that it was leveraged very often by the public.
Right.
I would be hesitant to take away that option for members of council because I do think it's a way for people who are out of town or sick, as you mentioned,
Yeah.
to stay abreast of the issues. So that would just be my input.
If I may, I would be interested in the council's direction on that issue, but I do think under our charter, it would be difficult to limit, say, participating in person via Zoom. If someone appears, given that there's no allowance in the charter for an abstention, you have to either vote yes or vote no, or it's counted as a yes vote, and kind of the requirements on city councilmen in that way. I think that preventing someone from voting or participating in any way because they appear via Zoom would maybe get us in a sticky situation.
That's a fair point, and I think it's fine to have people vote via Zoom. I don't have an issue with that at all. Just to clarify, I think that it's useful for people, whether they are participating fully in a session or not, to be able to have the option.
Well, it certainly is my opinion that there are a lot of inadequacies in whether it's Zoom or Microsoft Teams or some of these other electronic versions of some meeting capacity. When you look, for example, at executive session material, that material has to be very carefully provided and considered, and sometimes we can't show that material in an electronic manner, which also makes the decisions that come from that meeting by a member of the council maybe less adequate than members that are attending in person. So there are certain concerns that we have that if we allow that to be considered attendance, then it supports maybe less than full participation and full understanding of what the issues are, and therefore a full and complete understanding of what the vote is for those options. So I think that's another area that we have to kind of deliberate and figure out what can and can't be supported. Zoom hasn't been around very long, and there are competing meeting resources, but it's clear that we've had a lot of problems with adequate connections, understandable audio or video. So I think having some acceptable option in the area should be considered, but how best to define it in a specific manner is going to be a challenge. Mayor Pro Tem.
I would just like to say that out of all the levels of government, federal, state, county, it's your local city council representative that affects your quality of life the most. And I think it'd be a tragedy because Zoom could be abused. You could have a council member could never attend, and they're just going to be anywhere they want and just attend by Zoom. So it seems to me we should be able to have like minimal Zoom meeting, no more than 5 a year or something,
And to clarify a little bit my comments, I think that the council can set certain limits or choose not to support Zoom for meetings. That would be in the council's decision. I do think if council people are allowed to Zoom in, then you can't limit their voting. And then that's what I was talking about.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Mayor, I have something to say.
Yeah, Councilman Shishka.
Thank you very much. A couple of things. I've always wondered about executive meetings and Zoom, because executive meetings, we're always given the admonition, but you don't know who is in with the council member, or councilmen, I'm sorry. You don't know who is with the councilman when they're observing a Zoom executive meeting. And so that's always been kind of sticky for me, and I was wondering if Joe, if you had a problem with that, or if there was any way we could mitigate that, or I'm sure that all the council people are very honest, and if that's you're the basis that you'd like to go on, then I'm good with that too.
This is ultimately a decision for the council. Right. And so does that concern me? Yes, it concerns me. Is there ways to mitigate that? Maybe technologically that I don't know of. Mm-hmm. But in terms of what the council can decide, the council could decide, for example, that you can Zoom in for regular meetings but not executive sessions. These are decisions that the council can make. It would have to be uniform and have to be passed by the council, but I don't think that's unreasonable necessarily.
Okay, another thing, Mayor.
Yeah.
I always thought I was a relatively smart guy, but this consecutive meetings definition is just kind of putting a confused dog look on my face. It says, for the purposes of this section, consecutive shall mean successively following without interruption, occurring on successive days. And I got to be honest with you, is there no plainer language that we can, associate with that?
I think we could. I think the intent is that a day of meetings, for example, executive session, study session, and a voting meeting, would be one meeting for purposes of the charter.
Well, can we say that?
We can say that.
We can.
Yeah, I would like to make it as plain as possible, as obvious as possible for future councils, because we're discussing it today. We understand the context, but future councils may have confused dog look on their face. So, if we could do that, I'd appreciate it.
We could do that.
Well, one of the comments that I would additionally make is that when you run for city council and you're elected to city council, you're expected to be able to represent the voters. And you should accept the responsibility and the obligation to attend these meetings and make sure that you study the issues and you make good decisions. So spending too much time on figuring out how council people could not attend when they have an obligation to attend, I think we need to err on the side of supporting attendance as much as we possibly can. Councilman Montoya.
Thank you, Mayor. Just going back to Councilman Shushka's point a little bit. So in my mind, when I was reading through this a little bit, the thought occurred to me initially when I had understood the policy. It sounds like there's a shift, and I'm with Steve. I still have confused dog look on my face, I guess, here. So consecutive meetings. So you're saying that if someone missed, I guess what occurs to me, the way I previously understood the policy was that we could have an executive session, we could have a study session, and a voting session all on the same day. And if each of those is a separate meeting per the way the charter is written, do you have a situation where a member of council could miss the first two meetings of the day, attend that voting session, and then the following council session, they could also miss the first two meetings of the day and then attend the last? And I guess that's, to me, the spirit of what this charter, the way the charter is written, is to encourage council members to fulfill their duty to be elected representatives. And I guess in my mind, I'm not trying to say that I don't think anyone here is trying to weasel out of doing their job, to be clear, but I think that we need to make sure that it's really clear what the expectation is.
Yeah, and I think under the charter as it is now, without the procedure, you could do just that. You could miss 2 meetings, miss 2 meetings, and you couldn't be removed because of it. And so I don't know that what we're proposing changes that necessarily, although it could make it worse, conceivably. You could miss two
different days.
Yeah.
You could miss 2 days of meetings and then come back for the
Right.
third day, and then
And so that was proposed, as we said, because of, I guess, a little bit of originalist thinking as to what was proposed in 1979. But the changes have made it unclear what that was meant in 1979. The without consent of the council is unclear. Cease to hold office is unclear. I mean, we know what that means. Well, what's the mechanism of that? That's why I think we need a procedure. But the specifics of it, we proposed that language, but we're here to take direction.
Yeah, I know under the current rules, it requires the approval of the council to be absent. So what does that mean? You have to send a letter to all the members of the council, and then they have to send back a letter saying, it's okay with me that you're going to be absent, or some other email or text or a voicemail or some other type of a communication. Again, these are options for communication that didn't exist in 1979. I'll have to check with Al Gore, but I'm pretty sure that I'm accurate on that. Mayor Pro Tem?
While we're on the topic, I would just like to bring up texting during our meetings. Not only does it look like you're being inconsiderate to the voters and the speakers by texting, I think that it's also a quorum issue, because you could theoretically be texting other members on council. So I just would like to bring that up too.
Well, I think that's a different issue than we're considering today, but it could be included in the charter review. I don't know how it would impact a quorum, but it might impact open meeting law. Any other issues, or should we move on to Section E, where we're talking about call to the public?
So there was not previously any language within the council rules of procedure as it related to the agenda format for public comment and call to the public, because at the time that the rules of procedure were last updated, we did not have that section on the agenda. So since I was working on some adjustments, I went ahead and added that language in too. We do have a presentation request form that citizens, local organizations, what have you, can submit if they would like to make a presentation to the council at a meeting. And so Section E added in the language for members of the public who wish to make a presentation to the mayor and council shall submit a presentation request form to the city clerk upon approval by the mayor or 2 members of council. The city clerk will schedule the presentation for a future meeting. The note about the approval by mayor or 2 members of council falls in line with the agenda setting, in that the agenda is typically staff-driven unless we have a request from the mayor or 2 members of council to add an item to an agenda. And then I also added in language in Section F for the call to the public. So at the discretion of the mayor, a call to the public will be included on the agenda of voting meetings. During the call to the public, residents may comment and address council on matters not included on the posted agenda. Speakers must be present in chambers, submit a comment card with the city clerk prior to the start of the meeting, and are limited to 4 minutes, with the call to the public limited to 40 minutes in total. Pursuant to ARS 38-431.01H, members of the council may not discuss items that are specifically identified on the agenda. And I just tied in the language that we're currently using on our posted and published agendas for that section. And then I also added in a note, and this wasn't included in your agenda packet, but just for you all to be aware, I've discussed with legal, the council rules of procedure is adopted via a resolution. And so we would need to rescind the previous resolution in order to adopt these changes because they are substantive. But I added in a section that I went over with Joe and Matt within the resolution to allow us to update. For example, there's a city officials page that you all saw at the end of that rules of procedure that identifies all of the members of council. Obviously, as we have elections, that is subject to change. And so in order to make everything be current and up to date without having to present a new resolution to you every time, I did add in some language that you all can review if and when we bring forward changes to this, to allow non-substantive updates such as contact information and names to be changed without adoption of a new resolution.
Councilman Shishka.
Thank you. Sarah, I have a question. When it says here in call to the public, members of the council may not discuss items that are not specifically identified in the agenda, should that be members of the council and public? Because
So,
we've asked the public not to comment on,
well, so this is
agenda items.
specific to the call to the public in which they're supposed to only address you on items that are not on the agenda. The language in there about you all not being able to discuss it ties in with the fact that when a member of the public comes up and addresses us during that call to the public at the start of the meeting, they discuss with you any concerns that they might have. You can provide direction to staff for us to look into that further, to obtain their contact information, but you can engage in a dialogue with them about that because it's not an agendized matter.
Yes.
And that language comes directly from the
From the
open meeting
statute.
law.
sure.
Yeah. Should that be included that, that are not, may not discuss, et cetera, but may give direction to the staff? I think we should include
Yeah,
that.
we can include that.
Yeah.
Well, my comment on this is it really necessary to incorporate this into the rules of procedure? Obviously, it was something that I, as the newly elected mayor, recommended and were using, but we didn't alter the rules of procedure prior to adopting it and making it available to the public. And if we look back on quite a few of the past mayors, call to the public was never made available. So my question is this really necessary?
It's not. It's just an option that I thought council might want to have, if that's something that you all would like to commit to keeping moving forward.
I would like to see it in the policy. It's kind of like
Nice to codify it.
codifying it, yes, and so that the public can see that it's in there too.
Yeah.
Well, just realize that if it turns out our experiment fails and we want to remove it, we'd have to do that through resolution. But so far, it seems to be working the way we hoped. And
I find it
if we
very
have a
helpful.
majority of the council that would want to adopt that and bring it into the rules of procedure, then I think that would be fine.
Agreed.
All right, any other questions or comments? So what should we do now? Should we direct the city clerk and the city attorney to present these for adoption into the rules of procedure? Because we can't take action today.
Correct. So what we can do, if you all would like, is Joe and I can work together on taking into consideration all of the comments that we've received from you today and kind of ironing out the specifics of the language, and then we can bring it forward with the resolution at either the July 12th or July 26th voting meeting.
And only if everyone's here.
All right, well, fair enough.
Okay.
Thank you. I think that concludes this part of the study session. So I'll adjourn this study session meeting, and I'll hit the gavel. There you go.